Okay, here we are for another week's poetry talk. And the poet and poem that we're looking at today, the poet is William Blake. And he, and we're going to be looking at his poem, The Tyger. So, Blake, if you look in your class PowerPoint, in world literature, there is a slide on William Blake, and it's there near the beginning of the class PowerPoint. And so you might have clicked through a few slides, but you'll find it. The slide on William Blake. And so Blake as a poet kind of coincides with the Romantic period, which we're looking at in literature right now. So if you want, you can look at that slide, and I'm going to just talk about Blake for a minute. He lived from 1757 to 1827, which, as we've talked about, fits within the period of the Age of Revolutions, also known as the Romantic period especially in English literature. And right off the bat, I've got to tell you my favorite story about William Blake. So he was, people have argued that Blake might have been institutionalized if he was alive today. He was a little bit, probably had schizophrenia. But, he would do some very funny, strange things at times, right? He and his wife, one day, a friend came over to their house to visit, and the friend was looking around and walked through the house and found William Blake and his wife sitting out in the backyard, butt naked, and they were reading Paradise Lost together, which is a story about the fall in Genesis. And his friend was like, "What are you guys doing out here naked in the backyard?" And Blake said, "Oh, we're pretending to be Adam and Eve, in the Garden of Eden." And so that's just kind of the type of person William Blake was. It's interesting. So let me go into some of the details in here that you'll find on the slide. Again, the Romantic period, the heyday of it was from 1800 to 1850. During this time, and you'll see how some of this coincides with the Age of Revolution that we're already talking about, feeling and action were stressed. Romantic literature is not about philosophical reasoning and logic. It's about feelings and action, doing and emotion, right? Some other frequent themes are returning to your childhood, because people had the sense that, after the Enlightenment had kind of moved people away from, thinking as much as, it had kind of put all the emphasis on how great people are in our intellect. And it was, childhood was seen as the purest form of that. So when you were a child, that was when you were your best self. Having kids myself, I'm not so sure about that, that job isn't necessarily when you're your best self, but, and so a lot of Romantic poetry was about returning to your childhood, going back to childhood and trying to tap into the way you were then. Nature as a teacher, almost akin to God. Romantic poets talk about God, and sometimes it's almost like they mean nature instead, right? So again, feeling and action, returning to childhood, nature as a teacher, this kind of thing. Okay. So there in the slide, those pictures on the right. Blake, as well as so he was a writer, he was an illustrator, and he was a printer. He liked and his wife helped him in all of these things. So I'm moving ahead of myself there, but he created what is called illuminated texts, where he would bring together art and text. You see that top right corner there. That's the poem we're going to be looking at today, The Tyger. But it's like he published it this way. He created this art for it and put the poem there, which you got to admit just makes it more fun. If everything we read was illustrated like that, right? Um, the picture in the bottom right corner there, conceivably Blake's most famous artwork. This is it's called The Ancient of Days, and it's God reaching down with a compass, as he's creating the earth, deciding how big the earth is going to be, what's going to be the shape of things and stuff, measuring it, right? And so, yeah, that's conceivably Blake's most famous artwork is Ancient of Days there. And then you just have this dude, in the top there, spreading his arms out. Look at how wonderful I am, humanity. Second bulletin point under a writer, illustrator, and printer. Second bullet point there, in his work of like writing and illustrating and printing, especially the illustrating and printing aspect. He was helped by his illiterate wife, whom he taught to read and to write. So he married this woman, taught her how to read and to write, and she helped him in his business as a printer, which is how he got his most famous work out there. His paintings and stuff that he would do, and his poetry paired with them in these illuminated texts. He was an eccentric, as I already pointed out with that story, very eccentric, an eccentric mystic. And mystics were people who claimed that they saw visions and stuff, which is a big thing, certainly throughout religious history, across religions, is mystics, people that claim to see visions and stuff. An eccentric mystic who claimed that dead people gave him ideas and who was inspired by visions. I've already told you the garden story there, kind of pointing out his eccentricity. He rejected cold reason. Enlightenment, which we've been looking at previously, enlightenment bad. Blake was like, God is not a mathematical diagram. You cannot understand God with the human mind. And here, I think, given who Blake was, he's talking about God more in the sense of God as a person, as a being, right? But he's like, God is not a mathematical diagram. You can't fit your mind around it. His anger over social injustice plays a big part in a lot of his poetry and a lot of his writing, including the Tyger, which we're about to read. He liked juxtaposing opposite themes. His most famous work of poetry is a little book, tiny little book. It wouldn't take you that long to read it. A book called Songs of Innocence and Experience. And when you think innocence, think good, pure, clean, going back to childhood. The most famous poem from the Songs of Innocence section in there is a poem called The Lamb. And the poem is about reminding the lamb who made it, that God made it, and it's just about the innocence of this lamb and the goodness of that. The poems that are the experience part deal with kind of, think the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil in the Garden of Eden, that deal with like the hard things in life, the scary things in life. The awful things that people do to each other, social issues and stuff, experience, right? And so in poems from both a child's and an adult's perspective, think experience, as you grow up and you learn more about the world. And some things are really beautiful and wonderful. Other things you're like, I wish I didn't know that. I wish I didn't know about global warming, right? And so, yeah, Songs of Innocence kind of from a child's perspective, Songs of Experience from the adult's perspective. So, there's some background on William Blake. Let's take a look at his poem, The Tyger. Okay, so, and the link is in there. So we've been looking at the slide from the PowerPoint, but the link is attached to the video as usual, the link for the poem. This is one of my favorite poems. I memorized it when I was in college. It's funny, I've heard people who tell me, my brother included, people who do not like poetry at all, who have no interest whatsoever, but one of my brothers was like, oh, I love the Tyger. How can you not like this poem? Okay, sorry for trying to sell it before I've even read it to you, but I'm going to read it to you, okay? The Tyger by William Blake. Tyger, Tyger, burning bright in the forests of the night, what immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry? In what distant deeps or skies burnt the fire of thine eyes? On what wings dare he aspire? What the hand dare seize the fire? And what shoulder and what art could twist the sinews of thy heart? And when thy heart began to beat, what dread hand and what dread feet? What the hammer, what the chain, in what furnace was thy brain? What the anvil, what dread grasp dare its deadly terrors clasp? When the stars threw down their spears and watered heaven with their tears, did he smile his work to see? Did he who made the lamb make thee? Tyger, Tyger, burning bright in the forests of the night, what immortal hand or eye dare frame thy fearful symmetry? Alrighty. Hopefully I didn't come across as too corny reading that, but I can't read that without emotion because I'm like, it's just the imagery and everything. Yeah. So let's talk about it. You've got pretty simple, straightforward rhyme scheme. Tyger, Tyger, burning bright. Tyger, Tyger, burning bright in the forests of the night. The meter is a little funky. It's not iambic pentameter, it's not iambic tetrameter, but it does have a meter to it. Tyger, Tyger, burning bright. And it's, yeah, just kind of this catchy, I don't know, it'd be hard to get your mind around the rhyme scheme of this. In the forests of the night, what immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry? And so it's a challenge to get your mind around that meter. The rhyme scheme, not as challenging, right? Bright, night, eye, tree. That doesn't quite work, but he's like, you know what? Hey, it's my poem. Artistic license, right? Skies, eyes, spire, fire, art, heart, beat, feet, chain, brain, grasp, clasp, right? And you get it. And it's just, he just hits you every stanza with it, he puts the rhyme in your face. You're not waiting after like the first line to get the rhyme in the third or fourth line. No, he gives it to you the next line. And so it kind of like, I guess it's almost like it gives more of a punch to it, that the rhymes are like in your face. You get them right after you've gotten the first sound in that rhyme. All right. Looking over the poem here, he spells it with a Y. I think maybe that was it. Spelling is one of those things that morphs. And at one point you were allowed to spell it with a Y, and today we're like, no, you spell with an I. But spelling is always morphing and changing the accepted spelling of a thing. Tyger, Tyger, burning bright in the forests of the night, what immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful sin? He's like, immortal hand or eye, that's God. Or a God. It's like, what, even a God, what God's hand or eye could have made you, could have framed you, right? Your fearful symmetry. Symmetry is like one side looking the same as another side, a balance in like artistic perspective. And he's like, I'm terrified of your symmetry. You're a tiger, Who could have done this? Who could have designed this? In what distant deeps or skies burnt the fire of your eyes? Where did God or the gods, find your eyes? The fire. Where did they find the fire to put in your eyes? Where did they fly to? Where did they fly to find it? What hand would dare to seize the fire to make your eyes with? What shoulder, what art could twist the sinews of thy heart? Think of a blacksmith making something out of metal. What shoulder could have twisted the metal to make your heart? What artist, how much art did a person need to have, to be able to create you? A being need to be able to create you. When your heart began to beat, what dread hand, what dread feet? It's just talking the dreadful hand, the dreadful feet of this being, this creature. What hammer, what chain could have shaped you? What furnace heated and made your brain, right? What anvil, an anvil is what you put something on to shape it, shape metal with a hammer. What grasp dare its deadly terrors clasp, what blacksmith, what divine blacksmith could have worked up the nerve to take you and shape you on an anvil? When the stars threw down their spears and watered heaven with their tears, like at the beginning of creation, did he, meaning God, did God look at what had been made and did he smile? Did he smile to see this creature? Did he who made the lamb make thee? You've got that other poem in the Songs of Innocence, right? The lamb. And Blake's like, could the same being have made a lamb, an innocent little lamb, and made this creature, a tiger, right? Tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forest of the night. What immortal hand or eye, immortality, that's the divine, right? God, dare frame. How could God have dared to frame this terrifying thing, the tiger? Now, we go back and, tigers are scary creatures, You wouldn't want one chasing you through a jungle, so I get that. The fearfulness, the terror of a tiger, right? Compared to an innocent, fuzzy little lamb, But there's something else going on here. And, the time of revolutions, the age of revolutions, was also a time when you saw a lot of social issues with, industrialization in cities and stuff, and children working in factories, things like that. All these social issues that came from industrialization, and this poem is pretty clear. You can read it as just being this really cool, creepy poem about a tiger and how fierce they are, and it works great that way. It works amazing that way. It's one of those poems that you can read on that level and just enjoy it, But it's also the poem, if you know the time Blake was living in and how angry he got, upset he got about social issues and stuff, and him trying to deal with these issues in society and address them. This poem is also pretty clearly a metaphor about the evils of industrialization and the impact it was having on the people who are working in these factories and stuff, right? And so if you notice, there's a lot of terminology in here about industrialization. Second stanza, last line, what the hand dare seize the fire, right? What fire is this? He tells you in the third stanza. He's talking about blacksmiths and metalwork and stuff. What shoulder could have made this? Who could have twisted the sinews of your heart? What hammer, what chain, in what furnace was your brain, right? And so all these images, and then in the second to last stanza, you've got the stars weeping over this. The stars are crying over this, watering heaven with their tears. That second line in both the first and last stanza, the forests of the night. This is not a pleasant place to be, and in it is this glowing fire, this terrifying thing. And so he's tapping into, just what he saw as, at best, ambivalent, but really just, something that, not good for humanity, right? And so Blake is struggling with what he sees as kind of the evils, the dangers of industrialization. So, and you may be able to find another way to read the poem as you read it, but it works great. It's just a poem about the fierceness of tigers. You can take it a level deeper to thinking about industrialization and stuff, and the harmful effects it can have on humanity. Those who are stuck working those jobs, as around the world we still have today. We've got all of our health standards here in America, and still that kind of work is just very hard on a person physically. But in a lot of countries around the world, they don't even have the safety standards that we have. And we are frequently shipping out even our industrial work to other countries, where it's a large reason we do that is because you get cheaper products that way. And you go to Walmart and you get cheaper stuff, right? Because over there, people are like suffering in these factories and stuff where they don't have good health standards, they don't have good safety standards. So, wow, I just went off on a social tangent, but that's Blake. That's very much in line with Blake's thoughts, and things that Blake was trying to address in his own society. All right, so I will leave you to comment on this poem. See you next week.